with you today are all members of Ad Hoc. We're a digital services company focused on empowering agencies to deliver exceptional services and promote the general welfare. On the call today, you have myself, Ben Cattell, Bill Mill, Barry Patterson, and Libby Coffer. And throughout the week, we've had support and contribution from Sophie, Evangeline, and Sam, who couldn't join us today just as we balance schedules throughout the week. And this team came together with, from our experience of working with CMS and VA and looking at how we can improve the developer experience and use of the data and API that those agencies have available. And we applied that same expertise in thinking about the HMDA data publications. In coming into this tech sprint, the thing that really stood out to us and really gave us purpose for this week was how the information that is a part of the HMDA database can really play a critical role in combating inequality and inequity in the home loan market. And we looked at how sort of the problem that we were looking to address this week was how could we expand access to HMDA API, HMDA data and the API, and ultimately help create a more fair, transparent, and equitable mortgage process. And in thinking about addressing that problem, we had a couple of questions that we sought to answer this week. One was, how might we showcase how people use HMDA data, elevate the value of the HMDA APIs, and reduce barriers to using HMDA so that folks can get started right away in using this information. And our hypothesis for the week that guided our work was this idea of treating API users like end users will empower people to use HMDA data and HMDA APIs to support a more fair, transparent, and equitable mortgage process. And that idea of API users as end users comes from our experience of working at CMS and VA, and really means, for the people that are trying to use HMDA data and use the HMDA API, working to understand their needs and how they'd use the system, just like you would for a person looking to use a website or application. And so with that process, we did some initial discovery and interviews with folks who we think would use the API and data. And Barry can tell you a little bit more about what we learned there.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ben. So our challenges, in order to treat API users like end users, we first have to understand their needs and expectations. So we did some investigation. We found an investigative journalist and a college professor who use HMDA data, and we did some interviews. And it was interesting with the investigator interview. She was saying it's too often either or, like either the data is so simple it's not usable, or she has to download so much and go through 10,000 user fields. And she's not really tech savvy. And so how do we address that? And so by showing how people could use HMDA data combined with the data browser, we could address this. And then for the PhD academic that does historical research, he was asking questions like, oh, it'd be really nice if it would do this or this. And like, could I get granular geographic level at the level of census tract? And he's asking questions, and it turns out that, a lot of that is actually available, but he just didn't know it. And so the solution there is clarifying what information does exist in HMDA data, and APIs could address this. And so now I will hand it over to Libby.
Thanks. So based on the research that we were able to complete within the limited time frame of this sprint, and also drawing on ad hoc's extensive experience working on APIs and API documentation, specifically with CMS and the VA, we came up with a number of recommendations for the documentation, and well, just general content strategy recommendations. So focusing on using action-oriented tactical language to get people into using the documentation, into using the tools that are available right away, avoiding some of the maybe overly technical terms or like subject matter specific terminology to make it more welcoming to folks that might be new to this data, making sure that that is used consistently throughout the site. And then, like Barry saying, based on those recommendations from the interviewers, make it easier for folks to just kind of get right into it and start using the API, and give them some ideas of what they can do with that data. Next slide, please. So what we have here, just two side-by-sides. One is the existing website, and one is just a mock-up that we quickly put together, myself and Ben, to show different ways that we could use that kind of verb-oriented language. So telling people exactly, if you're here to fulfill your filing requirements, this is the track for you. Here's all the information that you're going to need. Here's where you can start doing the work. But if you're somebody like that academic or that investigator, and you want to explore things, like here's how you can start doing that. What kind of information is available to you, and wanting to make those two tracks, clear and distinct, while also appealing to those different user groups. Next slide, please. And the other way that we wanted to show people like how they could use the data was to use some actual things that we've worked on, things that we tried using the API tool. So you can see here, like, basically presenting some use cases for, hey, the mission statement of the purpose of this data, this act, is to do these three things. Well, here's some ways that you can do that, and here's the ways that that data can support those mission statements. So again, just two side-by-sides of a potential way of reorienting and just using what's already there, but in hopefully a more effective way that will get people into the data and more interested.
Sorry, just giving you the 2-minute warning.
Great. Passing it over to Bill. Thank you.
So another thing that is there already is the dataset filter, and it accesses the data browser APIs, but it is not exactly easy to see how that ties in. So one suggestion we had was to give the API request right along with the data filter that it's making in the background. You can figure that out by looking at the Chrome inspector, but it would be more helpful to people looking to maybe transition from looking at the web tool into doing more detailed analytics work if it were easier to see how the API was useful from what they were seeing on the front end. And so another thing that would help API users use the API is that there is a lot of reference documentation, and there are a few example tools, but what there aren't are like examples of walking all the way through using the data. So we're proposing that you might build some, or somebody might build some example IPython notebooks, or Jupyter notebooks actually is what they've been called now. And so I built an example Jupyter notebook right here that makes this map below, and the map isn't actually intended to show very much. What it's intended to serve as is a starting point of how you might work with this data. So it starts with what you're going to finish with, and then it walks through every step from getting the API data into a data frame, cleaning up the data, limiting it to exactly what you want the data to be, along with explanatory text to say what's going on, and then getting geographic data and merging that with the HMDA data, and finally turning that into a map, which is an example of a thing that people exploring this data are very likely to have to do. And so they won't want this exact map, and it's not that useful on its own, but it does provide a jumping off point where people could go into this. This is a live collab notebook. They could go into that, clone it, and start working with the data themselves and have more of a grip on what's going on.
So we're just a little beyond 10 minutes. Ben, do you have any? Is there any conclusion or anything? And we'll move to the Q&A portion of the presentation.
Sure. Yeah, I think in conclusion, we really want to look at how some small tactical changes that could be made today to the HMDA data portal and the HMDA data API could really elevate the open accessible data that CFPB has and can empower people to create a fair, transparent, and overall equitable society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Very good presentation, a lot of data, so I understand and appreciate you guys with the timeframes. So just asking the evaluation panelists if they would raise their hand if they have any questions, and we can get those questions answered.